Tina Williams stared at the sleek imposing buildings of Greenwich, Connecticut, as the elevator took her higher, slowly climbing to the penthouse off. Yet another mansion she had been tasked to clean at 23. Tina had hoped that life would be easier by now. She had left behind her small hometown in Appalachia for this fast-paced city where she believed big dreams were madabed. As the elevator rose, her stomach gurgled, not because of the height, but because of the deep sense of invasions felt with every floor. That passage didn't belong here, and she knew if Miller family was wealthy, impossibly so. With their large, pristine home in Onoff, the most affluent areas in Connecticut, Ryan Miller, a successful corporate executive, had arranged for Tina to clean his apartment on an urgent request. The instructions were simple: clean every inch of this luxurious space, make it sparkle, and leave no trace of a worker behind. But as Tina stepped into the penthouse, she felt like an intraderth pristine white walls, the elegant Persian rugs, the modern art hanging on walls. It was all too perfect of everything in its place. Everything cold, silent, untouched. It looked like Ashroom, a place where no real life had ever lived. She walked through the spacious living room, her steps muffled by the thick carpet, the smell of professionally clean furniture hanging the air. But something was missing. There was no warmth, no life in the room, no sign of anyone living here. Shekel didn't shake the eerie feeling. Thatch was cleaning not just a house, but an empty shell. As she finished dusting the list of the living room, she heard a faint sound, barely noticeable at first thought. Louder, a baby crying. Tina froze. The only thing she knew for sure was that Ryan Miller was supposed to be at a conference. His wife long deceased. There was no one here, not a soul, except this sound that echoed through the empty halls. She hurried upstairs, the cries growing louder, and for the first time she felt the sharp sting of panic raise her chest. There was a desperation in that cry. It wasn't just a baby needing food or a nap. It was a cry of someone new who had been left behind, abandoned. The sound tugged at something deep inside her, something she hadn't realized it existed, an instinct to protect Tonature. She reached the top of the stairs and spotted a half-open door at the end of the hallway. She approached cautiously, her breath shallow. Inside their room, a soft pink nursery settled out in stark contrast to the cold modern decor of the rest of the house. The walls were adorned with delicate pictures of animals. The soft glow of nightlight skated around it. It's a baby's room, a room filled with care, with love, and middle of it all, a small crib, an in-thought crib, a baby. At Tina's heart skipped a beat. The baby, no more than 3 months old, was crying uncontrollably. Her tiny face flushed, her eyes squeezed shut in distress. Tina's hand instinctively reached out for the child. She didn't know why, but the moment she picked the baby up, the crying stopped. As if the child had been waiting for this very moment, the baby's tiny hand gripped her shirt, and for a moment, Tina felt the weight of something unspoken, a connection she couldn't explain. She rocked the child gently, a sense of peace falling over her. As the baby settled into her arms, now calm and serene, the small face once contorted in pain was no relaxed eyes opening to gaze at Tina with a familiarity that felt unnerving. "Princess," Tina whispered softly, more to herself than to the baby, her heart aching with an emotion she couldn't name. "Where is your mom?" Before she could process what was happening, the door opened behind her. "Who are you?" Tino's shirt leaped in her chest. And she, Tornado, find a man standing in the doorway. Hughes, around 36, with dark, slightly messy hair and eyes that looked tired, weren't from exhaustion. He wore an expensive suit, but the loosened tie and rolled-up sleeves hinted at a man who had been through something far beyond the office. "See him. I'm here for the cleaning," Tiny stammered, her heart
racing.
I heard her querying. The man's eyes narrowed, his gaze affixed on Tina, his lips pressing together as though he were weighing something. "Wore you," he repeated, his voice sudden lighting with urgency. "How long has she stopped crying?" Tina's heart-pounded ass looked at the baby in her arms, whose eyes were now locked onto the man. His expression faltered for a split second, then he stepped forward, running a hand through his hair. "I'm Ryan Miller," the man said, his voice heavy with unspoken sadness. "This is my daughter, Helena." Tina glanced around the room. There were pictures of Ryan with Theba B on the walls, and one black and white, a photo of a woman smiling, looking radiant, but there were no Signs of amethyr in this room? Nothing that hinted at a woman who had once cared for that child? Where's your wife? Tina asked it, her voice trembling slightly. Ryan paused, as if the question had knocked wind out of him. She died. During childbirth. He replied flatly, his eyes turning distant. Tina held Helena tighter, as though the child could somehow understand the weight of themament. The silence stretched between them, until Ryan spoke again, his voice a quieter. This time she's been crying for weeks. I've had 3 different nannies and nothing's worked. I haven't slept in days. I don't know what to do anymore. Nez's instincts flared again, her hands moving gently over Helena's head, as she cooed softly to the baby. You need Simeon, who knows how to. Calm her down, Tina said softly. Sometimes babies just need to feel. They're not alone, sometimes they need to know they're safe. Ryan stood there for a long moment, staring at her, then, as though making a decision, he walked toward her, his eyes no longer angry, but filled with an almost desperate kind of hope. Would you consider staying? I can't keep going like this, please. Tina's heart pounded as the weight of his words sank, and she hadn't expected this. She hadn't expected to be offered something so life-changing, but she couldn't ignore the way Helena had settled so peacefully in her arms, the way she had already formed a bond with this child, a bond that felt strangely right. Ryan continued. I'm noticing for a maid. I need someone who can care for my daughter, someone who can be here when I can't, someone who can be with her she never had. Tina sat in the living room of the Miller penthouse, the stillness of the apartment pressing down on her like the weight of an ocean. Ryan Miller, the man who had asked for her help, stood at the kitchen counter, his back turned as he poured a glass of water. The sound of the refrigerator warming was the only thing that filled the space between them, and then there was Helena lying peacefully in Tina's arms, asleep. Now, after the long, desperate decrees that had echoed through the apartment just moments ago, in the span of a single afternoon, Tina's life had been turned upside down. One moment she was just a woman trying to make ends meet in a world that seemed too big and cold to hold any place for her, and now she was being asked to become something far more than a stranger offering temporary care. She was being asked to stay, to be the mother thought. Helena had never known Ryan Turned's, lowly, his eyes tired but piercing. He stood there, a man weighed down by Morathon, just the responsibilities of work or wealth. He was broken, and Tina, for reasons she couldn't fully understand, wanted to help him, to help them both. I'm not asking for help with the cleaning, Ryan said, his voice low, carrying thwit of a man who had carried too much for too long. I'm asking for someone who can't help me with her. She's been through too much already, and I'm too far gone. Tina could hear the rawness in his voice, a desperation that seemed to hang in the air. She shifted Helena in her arms, feeling the weight of the child. But it was a weight that felt more like a calto action than a burden. I'm not a noni, Tina said, her voice tentative. Looked up at him. I'm not a professional. I don't care, he replied immediately, his gaze never leaving her face. You already did more for her than anyone else has in weeks. You made her stop crying. You calmed her down when I couldn't. I just need help. The silence stretched thick with unspoken truths. Tina's mind raced, but there was something about the way Ryan stood there, raw and vulnerable, that kept her from turning away. I can't promise you'll be the mother you want her to have, she said carefully, still unsure of what was being asked of her. I'm just trying to survive. Just trying to figure out how to make it through Theo Day without feeling completely lost. Ryan's eyes softened. I get that, he said quietly, but I can't do this alone anymore. I've tried. It's not enough. Tina wasn't sure what to say next, but before she could speak, the phone rang, breaking the tense silence. Ryan quickly grabbed it at his face, hardening as he answered. Hello? His voice dropped to a whisper. The person on the other end spoke. Tina instinctively turned away, feeling like she was intruding on something private. She focused on Helena, who had begun to stir in her arms, her little eyes fluttering open as the conversation continued. Tightened with every passing moment, he glanced over at Tina, his expression filled with a mix of frustration and weariness. All right'll be there in 30, he said before hanging up abruptly. Who was that? Tiniest, her curiosity piqued by the sharpness in his tone. Just work. Ryan said, his voice distant. I need to go out for a bit, but I'll be back soon. Tina nodded, though the unease in her chest didn't disappear as Ryan grabbed his jacket and headed for the door. He paused. Thank you, he said quietly, his words like a breath that he had been holding for far too long. As soon as the door clicked shut behind him, Tina exhaled slow, looking down at Helena, who was still gazing up at her with wide, innocent eyes. The apartment was quiet. Again, the kind of quiet that made Tina feel like she was the only person alive. But this time, the silence didn't weigh in her the way it had earlier. 'Twasn't just a void, it was a chance to breathe. Think she could feel the baby's soft weight in her arms, but more than Thatch could feel the pull inside her, the sudden sense of responsibility she hadn't expected. And then she thought of Rian. How desperate he had sounded, how lost he seemed. It was clear that his life had shattered when his wife didn't. Now he was reaching for something, anything to help him hold it all together, and here she was, no experience and no qualifications. Just a woman who had a heart that wouldn't turn away. It wasn't her decision she could make lightly. Shek knew that, but it was a decision that had already begun to settle into her bonish. Had to help. When Ryan returned that evening, it wasn't just his presence that filled the room, it was his whole life pressing down on them both, intertwined with Tina's in ways she couldn't yet comprehend. He looked different now, like a man who had made a choice but didn't yet know what that choice would cost him. He entered the apartment, quietly unsure of how to approach her. He glanced at Helena, who was already asleep in Tina's arms. How is she? He asked softly, his voice strained. She's sleeping, Tina replied, her voice surprisingly steady. She's okay. Ryan approached them slowly, his eyes glued to Alina. Then to Tina, he seemed to be weighing something heavy, important. I don't know what to do as out her, Ryan admitted, his voice barely audible. I thought I could handle it, but Tina looked up at him, meeting high sighs. You don't have to do it alone, she said, her words surprising even herself. Here Ryan looked at her, searching her face, as if he were trying to dissuade her not to trust her completely. Finally he nodded. I know. I need you. I just don't know how to ask you for this, Tina, but I'm asking anyway. Will you stay? Seemed to hold its breath, and for the first time in what felt like forever, Tina realized that she wasn't just cleaning a house, she was walking into a life she never thought she would have a part of. Okay, she said, her voice firm but soft. I'll stay. Ryan's face softened in a way she hadn't expected, and the tension in the room lifted just slightly. Thank you, he whispered. Tina nodded, looking down at Helena, whose peaceful face seemed to brighten the room. The baby was safe for now, and so was she. But as she looked at Tria, and she knew that they had just made an agreement that neither of them fully understood. Yet it was the beginning of something. But what that something was, Tina couldn't say, and neither could Ryan. Weeks passed, and Tina had found herself settled into a rhythm. Helena was driven, her smiles growing more frequent with each passing day. Tina couldn't remember the last time she had felt so fulfilled. Every laugh from Thebaby felt like a small victory, and every moment with Ryan felt more like a promise than a responsibility. Had changed to the walls around him were slowly crumbling, revealing the man he had buried beneath his grief. He no longer looked at Tina as a caregiver, but as someone who had become a lifeline for both him and his daughter. They had developed a silent understanding, a bond forged not just by their shared love for Helena, but by their unspoken commitment to each other. It wasn't perfect, nothing ever was, but it was real. One evening, as Tina and Rian sat on the balcony watching the suns there, conversation turned to the futureth. Warmth of the setting sun seemed toilamate everything, their fears, their hopes, and the uncertainties that still loom. Large Tina, Ryan began, his voice quit, but sure, I've been thinking about what comes next about us. I know I've said this before, but I mean it now. I want you to stay. For good. Tina's heart fluttered at his words. She had known and thought Ryan was struggling with his feelings, with his past. But now she could see the sincerity in his eyes. This wasn't a fleeting thought, it was a commitment. The question was, what did it mean? For her, she had started this journey to survive, to make ends meet, and know she was standing at the edge of something she'd never imagined. Could she stay? Could she make this her home, her life? Ryan, she said softly, looking down at Helena, who was resting peacefully in her arms. I don't know what forever looks like, But I know I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere for now. Not when she needs me. Not when you need me. Ryan reached over, taking her hand. Gently and squeezed it. I need both of you more than you know, as Tina sat there, her thoughts whirled she had come to love. Lena Asheron and the bond between them was undeniable. But it wasn't just the baby, it was Ryan too. She had never imagined she'd find herself here this far from her roots, in a life so different from what she had planned. But now she couldn't help but feel that this was where she was meant to be. They didn't need to say anything more. Their silent exchange spoke volumes. The days that followed were filled with small victories. Helena's first steps, her first words, and Ryan's unwavering support as Tina worked through her own fears. But a real test came when they faced a challenge that threatened to tear their newfound family apart. Ryan's company, Hida, financial crisis, and for the first time since Rachel's death, he faced the possibility of losing everything: the apartment, his job, his security. It was a blow that made him question everything gained. The stress weighed heavily on him. Tina knew how hard it was to keep going when everything seemed to be falling apart, but she also knew that the strength they had built together could survive. This too, she stood by him just as she had promised. Even when he felt like giving up, together they found a way to weather the storm. Through it all, Helena was their constant reminder of what truly mattered. Every smile from her every tiny hand that reached out for them reminded them that love, true and conditional love, was all they need. Deadto faced the future months later in Asmel but heartfelt ceremony. Ryan and Tina decided to make their commitment official, surrounded by close friends and family. Helena was there. The tiny girl had unknowingly tied them all together. It wasn't a perfect ceremony bout. It didn't matter what mattered waste that. They had chosen each other. Each Dayak moment, the three of them together, had become a family as they stood hand in hand watching the sun dip below the horizon. Once again, Tina realized that the path she had started on, unsure and certain, had led her to exactly where she needed to be. The life she had imagined for herself was now shared with two people who made her feel whole. In that moment, Tina understood that love wasn't about perfection. It wasn't about bloodlines or societal expectations. Love was about choosing to be there every single day, despite the odds. And as Shell looked at Ryan and Helena, she knew that her choice was the right one. Do you think Tina made the right decision by staying with Ryan and Helena, even when everything was uncertainties? If you believe family is built on choice and love, no. If you think Sheshold have protected herself more, let me know in the comments. And don't forget, share the video with your friends also. Where are you watching from? I'd love to know.